I was in the middle of setting the dinner table in our Toronto home when my phone buzzed with a text from Lucas, my husband of 14 years. I glanced at it, expecting something normal, maybe a message about being late from work. But what I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. She needs our support. I'm moving in with her, already emptied our joint account. Ha ha. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake, but something inside me just snapped like a wire pulled too tight. I stood there, staring at those words. She needs our support. And before I could even process it, another text came in that hit me like a punch to the gut. She's pregnant, Ava. We have to be there for her. I know this is a lot, but we can be adults about this. Pregnant. My sister Chloe, 9 years younger, the girl I practically raised after our mom died, was pregnant with my husband's child. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw the phone across the room. I just stood there in our dining room with the smell of roasted chicken in the air, and my son Mason humming upstairs, oblivious to the fact that our family had just been blown apart. My mind was racing, but my body was calm, almost too calm. I set the phone down slowly, like it was a bomb that might go off if I moved too fast. Chloe and Lucas, the two people I trusted most in the world, had been sneaking around behind my back, building something together while I was here playing wife and mother. I wanted to feel shocked, but deep down I wasn't. I'd seen the signs for months, but I'd ignored them, because who wants to believe their husband and sister could do something like this? Late nights at work, Lucas being extra helpful with Chloe, driving her to appointments, helping her move into her new place in Mississauga. She'd even laughed about it once, saying how lucky she was to have a brother-in-law like him. I'd smiled and agreed, because why would I ever doubt them? They were family. Family doesn't betray you. Except when they do. I typed one word back to Lucas. Congratulations. No anger, no begging, no tears, just that single word. If he thought I was going to fall apart, or scream at him over text, he was dead wrong. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I called Mason down for dinner, my voice steady like nothing had happened. He bounded into the room, talking about some video game, and I nodded along, cutting the chicken, passing the potatoes, acting like my world hadn't just collapsed. But inside, I was already moving pieces around in my head, figuring out my next step. Because here's the thing, Lucas didn't know I'd been preparing for something like this for months. Not this exactly, not my sister being pregnant with his kid, but something. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a hotel in downtown Toronto, on a night he said he was out with friends. That was the first crack in the trust I'd built with him over 14 years. Instead of confronting him, I got smart. I started checking things quietly, moving my personal savings to a separate account, leaving just enough in our joint one to keep him from noticing. I'd even looked at our credit card statements and found more than I wanted to see. Charges for flowers, jewelry, another hotel stay. I'd suspected an affair, but I never imagined it was with Chloe. Never in a million years. That night, after Mason went to bed, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine, the expensive bottle Lucas had been saving for some big occasion. This felt like the right time to open it. My phone buzzed again with another text from him. I know this is hard for you, but Chloe is young. She's scared it just happened. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Please don't make this ugly. I laughed out loud, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the quiet house. Ugly. He thought I was the one making this ugly. He'd slept with my sister, gotten her pregnant, drained our joint account, and had the nerve to tell me not to make it ugly. I took a slow sip of the wine, letting the taste ground me. Then I forwarded his message to my lawyer, the one I'd hired 2 months ago when I first started putting my plan together. I didn't respond to Lucas right away. Instead, I typed something else short and simple. I understand you're right. She needs your support. Take care of her. I hit send and leaned back, knowing he'd read it and think I was breaking down or giving in. He had no idea he'd just walked into a trap I'd been setting for weeks. The next morning, I woke up and went through my routine like it was any other day. Mason was my priority, and I wasn't going to let him see me rattled. He came downstairs, rubbing his eyes, asking where Dad was. I smiled, keeping my voice, even saying Lucas had to go help Aunt Chloe with something. It wasn't a lie, not really. Mason just shrugged, grabbing his backpack and heading out the door to catch the school bus. As soon as he was gone, I made a call to my lawyer. "It's time," I said, and she didn't need any more explanation. We'd been preparing for this. Step 1 was to freeze all the shared accounts. Lucas thought he'd cleaned out our joint account, but what he took was nothing compared to what I'd already moved. Step 2 was the house. It was in my name, always had been. Lucas had tried to get his name on the deed last year, but I'd put it off, saying we'd deal with it later. Thank God I did. I called a locksmith, and by noon the front door had new locks. Lucas's keys were useless now. He didn't text or call that morning, probably thinking I was still processing, curled up somewhere crying, while he played house with Chloe. I let him believe that for a little while longer. Then my phone rang, and it was Chloe. I stared at her name on the screen for a moment before picking up. "Ava, please don't hate me," she said, her voice cracking like she'd been crying. I took a slow breath and said, "I don't hate you, Chloe." It was true. I didn't hate her. I pitied her because she had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. She sniffled and said, Lucas told her I'd said to take care of her, and asked if that meant I forgave them. I almost laughed, but instead I kept my voice smooth, saying, "Of course you'll see soon enough." There was a pause, and then she stammered something about Lucas wanting to move into her apartment, but it was too small and maybe they could. I cut her off right there. "I'm glad you called, Chloe, but Lucas won't be moving back here." She went quiet, and I could hear her confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. I glanced at the new locks on the door and said, "He doesn't live here anymore." I heard her gasp, and then she whispered to Lucas, asking what I meant. I could picture him freezing, his face twisting, as he realized I'd already started pulling the rug out from under him. That's when I hung up. I didn't need to hear the rest. I just lit the fuse, and now I was going to watch it burn. After I hung up on Chloe that morning, I sat at the kitchen table in our Toronto home, with a cup of coffee, feeling this strange mix of adrenaline and calm. I just dropped a bomb on Lucas and Chloe by changing the locks and letting them know he couldn't come back, but I wasn't done yet. This was just the start. Lucas thought he'd won by emptying our joint account and running off with my sister, but he had no idea I'd been preparing for months. I wasn't going to let him walk away with my life, my home, my son's future. My phone buzzed almost immediately after the call with Chloe, and I saw Lucas's name flash on the screen. I let it ring, not because I was scared, but because I wanted him to sweat. A minute later, a text came through. "What the hell, Ava? You changed the locks." I smiled to myself, taking a sip of coffee. He was panicking, just like I knew he would. Another text followed. "You can't do this. I need to get my stuff. You're being dramatic." His stuff. Not our stuff. The audacity made me laugh out loud. I typed back, "Oh, I didn't change the locks, the owner of the house did." I could almost feel his confusion through the phone. He called again, and I ignored it. Then another text. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers hovering over the keyboard before I replied, "No, Lucas. I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be." I wasn't just sitting there trading texts with him, though. While he was blowing up my phone, I was already on a call with my lawyer, Sarah, who I'd been working with for 2 months, ever since I found that hotel receipt in Lucas's jacket. "Everything's in motion," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The shared accounts are frozen, and I've filed the divorce papers under grounds of adultery." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Lucas thought he'd taken all our money, but what he got was pocket change. I'd moved the real savings months ago, into an account he didn't know about. The house was mine, always had been. We'd bought it before we got married, and I never put his name on the deed. He'd pushed for it last year, saying it'd make things easier, but I brushed it off, and now that decision was paying off. Sarah kept going. He'll probably try to fight the divorce, but with the evidence we have, his texts, the receipts, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. I smiled, thinking about how Lucas had no idea how deep I'd planned this. Let him try, I said, and hung up. By noon, Lucas was texting again, this time with a different tone. Ava, we need to talk. You can't just lock me out. I have rights. Rights. The word made my blood boil. He'd slept with my sister, gotten her pregnant, and thought he could talk about rights. I didn't respond. I was done playing his game. Instead, I called the bank to double-check that every shared account was locked down. The agent confirmed it, and added that someone had tried to access the joint account that morning, but got blocked. I could picture Lucas standing at an ATM in Mississauga, where Chloe lived, his face red, as the machine spit out an error. That image kept me going as I moved to the next step. I went through our home office, pulling out every document Lucas might try to use against me. Credit card statements, bills, anything with his name on it. I found more proof of his spending over the years. Expensive watches, a weekend trip to Montreal, he said, was for work. All of it added to the pile Sarah would use in court. Then Chloe called again. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me press the button. Ava, please, she said, her voice shaky like she'd been crying for hours. I stayed silent, letting her ramble. He didn't know you were going to do all this. He thought you'd be okay with it. Okay with it. I gripped the phone tighter, but kept my voice steady. What did he think, Chloe, that he could cheat, steal my money, and still walk away with my house, my life? She sniffled and said, We're having a baby, Ava. It's not just about him. I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made her go quiet. That's not my problem, Chloe. You made your choice. She started crying harder, saying Lucas told her he had everything under control, that they wouldn't struggle. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Chloe, he lied to you, just like he lied to me. There was a long pause, and then she whispered. He said, we could move back into your house that you'd let us. That was it. The real plan. Lucas hadn't just betrayed me. He'd banked on me being weak enough to let him and Chloe waltz back into my home like nothing happened. I bit back a smirk and said, He was wrong, Chloe. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. Then I hung up before she could say anything else. That afternoon, Lucas showed up at the house banging on the front door. Ava, open up, he shouted loud enough that I worried the neighbors might hear. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to him yell, You need to let me in. I opened the door just a crack enough to see his face red and sweaty, his hair a mess. He didn't look like the smug guy who sent me that haha text 2 days ago. He looked disparity. You need to let me in, he said, pushing against the door. I held it firm and said, No, Lucas, you don't live here anymore. His jaw clenched and he snapped, You're punishing us for something that just happened. I raised an eyebrow, feeling the anger bubble up, but keeping my voice calm. Punishing you? No, this is just you getting what you deserve. He scoffed, saying I knew you'd be vindictive. That made me laugh. You thought I'd be weak, Lucas. You thought you could take everything, and I'd just let you. He flinched like my words hit harder than he expected. Then he tried a different angle. I have rights, Ava. I'll fight for the house. I smiled, knowing he still didn't get it. Go ahead, Lucas, hire a lawyer. See how that works out when you can't even pay for a hotel room? His face went pale, and I saw the moment it hit him that I wasn't bluffing. I shut the door in his face and locked it, hearing him curse outside before he finally gave up and left. That night, I sat with another glass of wine, feeling the weight of the day settle in. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Lucas's lawyer reached out. They're already talking mediation, which means he knows he's screwed. I smiled to myself. Lucas was scrambling, and I was just getting started. He thought he could betray me and walk away with everything, but I'd been ready for this. Every move I made was calculated, and by the time he figured out how far behind he was, it'd be too late. I wasn't just protecting my life. I was taking it back, and nobody was going to stop me. The morning after I slammed the door in Lucas's face, My phone started buzzing again like it was possessed. I was sitting at the kitchen table in our Toronto home, drinking coffee, trying to keep my head clear for Mason, who was getting ready for school. Lucas's name kept flashing on the screen with text after text. Ava, you've made your point. Let's be adults about this. Then I need a place to stay while I figure things out. And finally, you're turning this into a war, and you'll regret it. Regret it? I almost laughed, but the anger was still there, burning hot under my skin. He'd slept with my sister, gotten her pregnant, tried to steal our money, and now he was threatening me. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to let him drag me into his mess. Instead, I blocked his number right there, feeling a rush of control as I did it. Mason came downstairs asking if Dad was coming home tonight, and I knelt beside him, brushing his hair back, saying, "Dad's staying with Aunt Chloe for a while, because sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, and they have to deal with the consequences." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded, saying, "Okay," before grabbing his backpack and heading out to the bus. That one word from him was enough to keep me focused. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about protecting my son. By noon, my lawyer Sarah called with an update that made me sit up straight. Lucas's attorney is pushing for a meeting. They're claiming you acted maliciously by freezing the accounts and changing the locks. I smirked, leaning back in my chair. Maliciously, I'd acted legally, and they knew it. Sarah kept going, saying, "They're also saying Lucas has no financial safety net and can't support Chloe because of your actions." I laughed out loud, a sharp sound that echoed in the quiet house. "Good," I said. "Let him figure out how to support his new family without my money." Sarah chuckled on the other end and said, "Here's the best part. His lawyer didn't know the house was only in your name until I sent them the deed. They're scrambling now because Lucas thought he had a claim to it." I felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing Lucas was starting to realize how far behind he was. I told Sarah to keep pushing the divorce filing and make sure every piece of evidence was ready. The texts, receipts, proof of his affair with Chloe, all of it was going to bury him. Then Chloe called again, and I almost didn't pick up, but I wanted to hear what she had to say. "Ava, please," she said, her voice shaky and desperate. "Lucas is losing it. He's saying you ruined his life, and we don't know what to do." I stayed silent, letting her talk. "He tried to use his credit card this morning, and it got declined. He's got overdraft fees piling up, and he's blaming me for everything." I smirked, picturing Lucas, yelling at Chloe, the same way he used to snap at me when things didn't go his way. "He's saying if I hadn't gotten pregnant, none of this would have happened," she added, her voice breaking. That hit me harder than I expected, not because I felt sorry for her, but because it was so predictable. Lucas never took responsibility for anything. I took a slow breath and said, "Chloe, he's treating you exactly how he treated me. You just didn't see it before." She went quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I think I made a mistake." I didn't soften. "You made several, Chloe, and now you're living with them." She started crying, saying, "My lease is up next month, and Lucas said we'd be okay, but we don't even have a place to stay." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of her words but not letting them pull me in. "You'll have to figure it out, Chloe, just like I did," I said, and hung up before she could beg anymore. That afternoon, Lucas must have gotten a new number because a text came through from an unknown contact. "Ava, you're destroying everything. Just let me come back and talk." I stared at the message, my fingers itching to reply, but I didn't. He wasn't worth my time. Instead, I called Sarah again to check on the divorce papers. She said, "Everything's filed and I've got a meeting with his lawyer tomorrow. They're already backing off the mediation idea because they know they've got nothing." I smiled, feeling the pieces fall into place. Lucas had always thought he was untouchable, but now he was learning the hard way that actions have consequences. By evening, I was going through more documents in the home office when my phone rang with another unknown number. I picked up, ready to shut Lucas down, but it was his friend Mark, someone I hadn't talked to in months. "Ava, look, I know things are bad, but Lucas is crashing on my couch and he's a mess," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "He's saying you kicked him out with nothing, and he's got no money. No place to go. I laughed a cold, bitter laugh that made Mark go quiet. Mark, he cheated with my sister, got her pregnant, and tried to take my money. He's not my problem anymore. There was a long pause, and then Mark said, "Yeah, I get it. I just thought you should know he's not doing well." I hung up without another word. The next morning, Sarah called with news that felt like a punch of victory. Lucas tried to withdraw money from his personal accounts yesterday and found out they're maxed out. His lawyer admitted he's got no funds to even pay them. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. Lucas had been reckless for years, blowing money on watches, trips, a leased car he couldn't afford, and now it was catching up to him. His lawyer's pushing for a settlement, Sarah added. But with the adultery evidence and him abandoning the marriage, they're not getting anything. I told her to keep the pressure on and make sure Lucas felt every bit of this. That afternoon, Chloe texted me again, saying Lucas is talking about suing you for financial damages. He's saying you trapped him. I laughed so hard, I almost dropped my phone. Trapped him. He'd trapped himself the moment he thought he could betray me and walk away. I didn't respond to her, but I forwarded the text to Sarah, who said it was just a desperate move that wouldn't hold up in court. By the end of the day, I sat down with a glass of wine, feeling the tension in my shoulders start to ease. Lucas was falling apart, and I was still standing. He'd thought he could break me, but every move he made just showed how little he understood me. I'd planned for this, protected my home, my money, my son, and now I was watching him crumble under the weight of his own choices. My phone was quiet for the first time in days, and I let myself breathe, knowing the worst of the storm was passing. Lucas was out of moves, and I was just getting stronger. A couple of days after Lucas's lawyer admitted he had no money left, I got a call from Sarah while I was at my boutique in Toronto, going over new inventory. "You're not going to believe this," she said, almost laughing. "Lucas and Chloe are being evicted from her apartment in Mississauga." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Evicted?" I asked, and Sarah explained that Chloe's lease was in her name only, and she hadn't paid rent in weeks, so the landlord served them a notice last night. I let out a low whistle, picturing Lucas and Chloe packing their bags with nowhere to go. He'd abandoned our family for her, thinking he could live off my money forever, but now they were both homeless. It was almost too perfect. Sarah added, "Lucas's lawyer is begging for a settlement now, saying he's got no way to support Chloe or himself." I smirked, leaning back in my chair. "Let them beg," I said. "He made his choice." Sarah agreed and said she'd keep pushing the divorce to make sure Lucas got nothing. I hung up feeling this strange mix of satisfaction and calm, like I was finally seeing the light at the end of this mess. That morning, Mason asked me again about his dad, and I could see the worry in his eyes. I sat him down at the table and said, "Your dad made some big mistakes, and he's dealing with them now. But you and me were going to be okay." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully get it, and that broke my heart a little. I didn't want to tell him his dad had run off with his aunt and left us for a new family. How do you explain that to a 12-year-old without breaking him? I hugged him tight and promised we'd get through this together. After he left for school, I called Sarah again to make sure the divorce included full custody for me. I wasn't going to let Lucas anywhere near Mason until he proved he could be a real father, and right now, he was failing at that worse than ever. By noon, Chloe texted me from a new number, probably because I'd blocked her old one. "Ava, I don't know what to do." Lucas left. He just walked out last night, saying he needed space. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. So Lucas had abandoned her too. It wasn't a surprise, but it still hit me hard, not because I cared about Chloe, but because it showed exactly who he was. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the text sit there while I went through some paperwork for my boutique, which was doing better than ever. Chloe texted again an hour later. "We got evicted today. I'm pregnant, and I don't have anywhere to go. Please, Ava." I felt a pang of something not quite pity, but this heavy realization that she was in over her head. I typed back, "Now you know what it feels like, Chloe. Figure it out." It was harsh, but it was true. She'd made her bed with Lucas, and now she was lying in it, just like he'd left me to do for years. That afternoon, Sarah called with another update. Lucas's lawyer says he's staying with a friend, but he's out of options. They're dropping the financial damages claim because they know it's pointless. I grinned, feeling the weight of the last few weeks start to lift. Lucas had burned every bridge, and now he was drowning in the mess he'd made. I told Sarah to finalize the divorce terms as fast as possible. I wanted this over so I could move on with my life. By evening, I was at the boutique going over sales numbers with my assistant when my phone rang with an unknown number. I picked up thinking it might be a supplier, but it was Lucas. "Ava, please just listen," he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't slept in days. I didn't hang up, but I didn't say anything either. I messed up. Okay, I know that now. Chloe's not what I thought she was. She's immature. She doesn't get how hard life is. I smirked, hearing the desperation in his voice. He'd finally realized Chloe wasn't the fantasy he'd built in his head, but I wasn't going to let him off that easy. "She's pregnant, Lucas," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is what you wanted, remember," he groaned, saying. "She expects me to fix everything, but I've got nothing, no money, no home, no future." I cut him off. "Whose fault is that, Lucas?" He didn't answer, and I could feel his silence like a weight. "You thought Chloe was better than me, younger, more exciting, but now you're stuck, and you're begging me to save you." He exhaled sharply, saying, "Ava, please just let me come back for a little while. I need time to figure this out." I laughed out loud, the sound sharp and final. "You think I'd let you step foot in my house again? You're delusional, Lucas." I hung up before he could say another word. That night, I sat with a glass of wine going over the boutique's expansion plans. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Divorce terms are almost finalized. Lucas's side is out of moves. They're just stalling now." I smiled to myself, feeling a calm I hadn't felt in months. Lucas was unraveling faster than I'd expected. He thought he could cheat and steal and walk away without paying a price, but I'd made sure he felt every consequence. I glanced at a photo of Mason on the counter and felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about me winning, it was about building a life for my son where we didn't have to depend on anyone, especially not a man like Lucas. My phone stayed quiet for the rest of the night, and I let myself relax, knowing Lucas was out of options and I was holding all the cards. He'd tried to break me, but I was stronger than he ever gave me credit for, and now he was learning that the hard way. A week after Lucas begged me to take him back, I got a call from Sarah while I was at my boutique in Toronto going over new inventory. "It's done, Ava," she said, her voice practically buzzing with excitement. "The divorce is finalized. Lucas gets nothing, no house, no money, and you've got full custody of Mason." I put down the stack of invoices I was holding and felt this wave of relief wash over me like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. I thanked Sarah and hung up, standing there in the middle of my store, surrounded by racks of clothes and the hum of customers. My boutique, which Lucas used to call a silly hobby, was thriving, and I was about to open a second location in Scarborough. I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit his idea of a wife, but now I was free and stronger than ever. I texted Mason, who was at school, saying we'd celebrate with pizza tonight, and he sent back a thumbs-up emoji that made me smile. This was for him as much as it was for me. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number, and my stomach tightened because I knew it was probably Lucas. "Ava, I'm sorry I messed up. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, feeling a flicker of anger, but mostly just exhaustion. He was still trying to claw his way back, like I owed him something after everything he'd done. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked the number and went back to work, helping a customer pick out a dress. I wasn't going to let Lucas drag me back into his chaos. Sarah had told me he was bouncing from couch to couch in Toronto, crashing with friends who were getting fed up with him. His credit was shot, his savings were gone, and he'd lost his job because he couldn't keep it together. I'd heard through a mutual friend that he'd shown up at his old office, looking like he hadn't showered in days, and they'd sent him packing. Lucas had burned every bridge, and now he was drowning, but I wasn't throwing him a lifeline. By evening, I was at home with Mason, eating pizza, and laughing about some dumb joke he'd heard at school. He didn't ask about his dad anymore, and I was grateful because it meant he was starting to move on. I'd been careful to keep him shielded from the worst of it, but I knew he felt the absence. I hugged him before he went to bed and promised we'd go to a Raptors game next weekend. After he was asleep, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and my laptop open, looking at plans for the new boutique. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe, and I hesitated before opening it. "Ava, you were right about everything she wrote. Lucas left me. He said he's not ready to be a father and blamed me for the baby." I clenched my jaw reading those words. Of course he did. Lucas had spent our whole marriage blaming me for his failures, and now Chloe was his new target. She kept going, saying I'm pregnant and alone, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. I ruined everything with you for a man who never cared. I felt a pang of something, not quite pity, but this heavy understanding that she'd been naive and paid the price. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sipped my wine and thought about how Chloe had chosen Lucas over our family, and now she was learning the hard way, what I'd known for years. The next morning, Sarah texted me with a final update. Lucas tried to appeal the divorce settlement, but the judge threw it out and ordered him to pay court costs. I laughed out loud sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee. Even in his downfall, he was still trying to manipulate his way out, but nobody was buying it anymore. I went to the boutique feeling lighter than I had in months. My assistant came in later with a smirk saying, "You won't believe who I saw outside, just standing across the street, staring at the store." I raised an eyebrow and she said Lucas. He looked rough. Ava like he hadn't shaved or changed clothes in days. I glanced out the window, but he was gone. Still, I knew what it was. He was seeing everything he'd thrown away. The life, the stability, the woman who'd held him up for 14 years. I didn't feel angry anymore, just done. I went back to work, finalizing plans for the new store, and didn't give him another thought. That night, Chloe called and I picked up against my better judgment. "Ava, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking like she'd been crying for hours. "I thought Lucas loved me, but he used me, and now I'm stuck with nothing." I stayed silent, letting her talk. "I regret everything I did to you. I don't know how to fix this." I took a slow breath and said, "Chloe, I feel bad for you, but I don't owe you anything." She sniffled, saying, "I know, I just needed you to hear it." I hung up after that, not because I was angry, but because I was ready to let go. Chloe would have to figure out her life just like I had. I wasn't her sister anymore, not after what she'd done. A few days later, I was closing up the boutique when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Lucas. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I deleted it without a second thought, because for the first time in 14 years, he wasn't my problem. I walked out of the store, locking the door behind me, and felt this quiet peace settle over me. My life was mine again. The house was mine, the money was mine, the future was mine. I'd built something better, not out of revenge or anger, but because I deserved it. Lucas was stuck in the ruins of his choices, but I was thriving, and I wasn't looking back. I got in my car and drove home to Mason, knowing whatever came next, we'd face it together, and that was more than enough.